Hey guys, how's it going? I want to discuss some porting topics that might help you guys. Some things I've been noticing and I've been understanding about porting. Making my saws run better now, I noticed. It's like Tin Man says, sometimes less is more. I want to go over your intake port, why texturing it's very important, I believe. Texturing your transfers and polishing your exhaust. I also want to go over Squish, some things I learned that may help you. Because sometimes maybe having too tight a squish is going to slow your saw down, and I'm going to get into why I believe that is. Okay, now some of the saws I've been running lately, I've been noticing that keeping more of a stock intake height and texturing the port actually makes the saw run better. Okay, this is exactly what I did to my buddy's 041. I did textured the intake, polished the exhaust, and he was so happy with it. I thought it ran pretty good too, man. I thought it ran real good, and I did a little video on that, and I cut a little bit. Chain was a little bit dull. I had to throw that video like 5 minutes. I threw it together, but when I did that, it's like Buck and Billy says. He says, be kind. Do things out of goodness of your heart. And I learned a lot on that saw. Like I said, I also got this bad boy. Little hedge trimmer. He threw that in for free because he was so happy with it. And what I learned on that saw, and I've been learning on all these and plus the other saws I got, that just texturing the intake will make your saw run better. It'll actually make it start easier, start hot better, and make your carburetor pull harder. And why that is because when you texture this, it creates a vortex effect. Okay, like it's kind of hard to, it's theoretical, okay? And what it does, when it does that, the fuel doesn't puddle up in here. It wants to encourage flow through your cylinder. So it goes down through your transfers and out your exhaust. Faster. Like I said, that's the whole point of porting. Like the 660, I'm going to explain. Now my MS 660 at Farmer Tech, I thought I had a bad carburetor. It was flooding because at idle, it would load up so bad. You'd see oil dripping out the muffler. The whole front of the saw would be all full of black oil, and it was just kind of nasty. And I thought, well, maybe I should epoxy the intake. Maybe the intake's too low, because it was at 162 duration. And I says, well, I'm going to try to retexture that better. Just an idea I had. I textured it better, kind of almost like 60 grit finish with let's see, I don't have my bit. See this tile cutting bit? Probably not going to focus very good. Tile cutting bit. That's all I did to the 660, and make sure I use this textured up like a 60 grit finish, and I noticed it's like the saw was a different saw. The throttle was snappier. Notice it had a little more power, and it was like reliable. It was easier on gas too, believe it or not. So if you guys are building saws and say you have a problem with your saw, we'll say maybe you think, oh, my carburetor's not right. Well, maybe it's not nothing wrong with the carburetor. It's just your intake isn't textured right and it can't pull on your carburetor correctly. Does that make sense? Well, obviously you get to texture your transfers, so it's does that as well, and polishing your exhaust so it comes out, you know, a little better and so carbon don't stick. So next time, guys, give that a shot. See what happens. And another thing I've been noticing, Squish. I think I'm going to try to stay away from having too tight a squish. We'll say 20, 22. Like Donnie Walker, he likes 25 or 30. And I've noticed 391 right here. This is 39,000 squish. My buddy's 041, 39,000 squish. Notice this ran better, 39,000 squish. Okay, I'm going to explain some things here. Obviously, let me give you the best illustration I can give you. All right, now we'll just say that this is up here's your combustion chamber. We'll just say, okay, now your transfer's over here. Okay, we'll just say that's the port coverage. Your piston's at bottom dead center. So if you were to take the base gasket out, or we'll say lower your cylinder, what's that doing? We'll just say you do that. You're going to have less coverage, port coverage over your piston, right? Even though you didn't change your blowdown, you changed the port coverage of your piston. So when you have a high squish, which is more compression, not all of it comes out your exhaust. And I've noticed what happens when you do that, it puts air and pressure down inside your transfers, and you'll see your carburetor spit back. Like this. I noticed that with the 372, when I had a tight squish, 160 duration on my intake, 160 duration on my exhaust. Obviously the blowdown, I had it set, what, 27? It was a little high, but I noticed that it would spit. But when I loosened up the squish, ran better. If that makes sense, so maybe on second thought what you should do, I know a lot of people say, oh, don't touch your transfers. You might have to in some cases. So you have the correct port coverage over your piston, like, okay, instead of like when you lower your cylinder, we'll just say that. That's not going to be enough theoretically, right? So maybe next time mess with that. That's what I'm going to try on this, just for fun. I'm going to try to raise these transfers, see if I can get it to run better. Because this shouldn't be spitting back here, and I think that's why it is. Because this has 30 degrees of blowdown, not that I did anything to it, it's just the way the cylinder was out of the box. Now the 42 millimeter cylinder had 16 degrees of blowdown, so maybe I ought to try 22, see what happens, see how it runs. Just an experiment, some things to think about, guys. So I'll give you a little review here. Texture your intake, don't worry about lowering your intake so much, because you might make your saw run slower. Just mess with stock. I mean, a few degrees, obviously. I've been trying to stay away from like 160, I've been trying to go like 153, 155. They seem to run better. Unless you do everything else to it to make it run, but you know. And exhaust, polish it. I notice that makes a difference as well. And squish. Try to keep maybe, you know, more of a stock squish. Maybe like we'll say 30 or 35 thousandths. I mean, if you want to, I know it's like a pride thing. Oh yeah, we gotta have 20,000 squish. Oh, I gotta have the exhaust roof at 98. Gotta have the intake at 160. I know people think that, but I've been noticing on some saws it's not necessary. Does that make sense? So I guess the moral of the story is, unless you know exactly where to grind things, do it. Unless you don't, experiment. So, okay guys, till next time, keep on feeling the heat.